Welcome back to Machines Incorporated. I'm Jake, and today we're going to be working on my Jeep Cherokee again. We have a no crank, no start issue, so when we turn the key, absolutely nothing happens, but it's been intermittent. I've gone through and run a few tests and diagnosed it to figure out it's the neutral safety switch. This is a switch that's on the side of the transmission that is essentially going to know whether your vehicle's in park or if you're in neutral. So it knows that it's safe to actually start the vehicle. Obviously, you wouldn't want to start the vehicle while it's in gear, reverse, such like that. It's a small electrical connector that's mounted on the transmission that essentially just sees the position of the transmission before it allows you to start the vehicle. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove the neutral safety switch. We're going to take it apart and try to refurbish it and reinstall it. It's a very common issue on these Jeeps that they can get some crud in there, like water or mud, that can mess up the contacts to where it's not sending proper signal to the transmission or to the computer. And yeah, so let's dive into it. Before we get started, I do like to lay down a moving blanket. Just adds a little bit of pad to be able to lay on when you're actually working. Makes it a little more comfortable and makes the job a little bit easier. Alright, so it's a bit tricky to get a good view, but crawling underneath the passenger side of the vehicle, this here is going to be the neutral safety switch on the side of the transmission, right above the trans pan. This piece right here is what's going to actually send into the unit, indicating what gear that the transmission is in. And then up above there is a small wiring harness that's going to go up, and that plugs into the ECU to let your vehicle know what gear it's actually in. To remove this, there's a couple small safety tabs on the sides of these nuts. So we're going to bend those open and slightly loosen this nut. Then this bolt up here above, we're going to completely loosen and take that bolt off. And then this whole neutral safety switch should be able to slide out. So we'll go ahead and pull that off. Now the connector for the neutral safety switch is also on the passenger side of the vehicle. It's going to be right down here off the main harness, and it is this connector right to the side. I'll show you in a little bit more detail. It's pretty easy to follow that connector down to the neutral safety switch. Here is the neutral safety switch removed. This piece here is what we were talking about that rotates with the transmission, which will turn an internal piece here to actually indicate what gear it's in. This is the connector that we undid underneath the hood. It's an 8-pin connector, but only utilizes 6 pins, standard waterproof connector. So now what we're going to do is, before we take this apart, I'm going to go ahead and just clean it up to make sure that none of this crud gets inside. As you can tell, it's definitely pretty crusty from hanging out and plenty of wheeling trips. So we'll go ahead and get started cleaning it up. All right, so it's not perfect, but definitely a lot better than it was. Went ahead, so we used a combination of brake cleaner and then some nylon bristle brush and a brass bristle brush, just depending on whether we were cleaning the metal or the plastic side. We just went ahead and cleaned all the gunk off, so we're ready to go ahead and disassemble it and pull it apart. So we're now very carefully going to remove the backing plate off of here. All right, and as we expected, we can tell there's a good amount of corrosion that's in these. So there's a little bit of, it seems like even dirt that actually got inside. These are the metal contacts here, which are going to indicate which actual gear you're in. And this is the piece that's going to swing with the transmission. It's pretty crusty, but that'll swing with the transmission, touching these different contacts to indicate what gear it's in. So to clean these up, I'm going to be using some electronic cleaner. Essentially just going to spray it on a lint-free towel, wipe the insides here, get them as clean as possible. And then we're going to pull out some of the contacts here, remove the springs, and clean those up as well. All right, so we've got everything cleaned up here now. This outer casing, pretty easy to do. Just scrubbed it down. Make sure to clean this outer seal. The selector here that moves back and forth. Do want to clean down inside where these little contacts fit, because if a little crud's in there, it can prevent the contacts from actually pressing up against these guys. And same thing in here, just nylon bristle brush with the electric cleaner. Got in there nice and deep like, and got it all set. So now we're going to go into reassembly. So I have a little bit of dielectric grease on my finger here. I'm going to start by assembling this guy. These springs, I'm just going to put a little dab of grease on these guys. Drop them down in. Then these contacts here. Gonna put a little even thin coat on either side to make sure they glide nicely inside this. Then this portion right here is what's actually guided around on this O-ring. So I'm going to put a little bit of grease on here, and I'll put a little bit on the O-ring side as well, just to help that seal and help that O-ring, or not O-ring, but the seal last as long as possible. And then going to put a little bit on this inner ring as well, because that's what's actually rotating in the main body of it. All right, I did forget to mention too, I did take a little bit of 3000 grit sandpaper and just clean up the very surface face of all these contacts to make sure they get a good connection. Next, going to take a little bit more of this grease and even put it on the face of these contacts here to ensure everything glides smoothly. All right, install this piece back inside. There we go. So you can see as it moves, these contacts are going to wipe across each other, and that's what's telling it what gear it's in. A little bit of extra silicone grease inside this seal. Oh, almost forgot. This is the seal that connects these two housings. Gonna clean this up real quick. And then I am gonna put a small thin layer of grease all along this gasket to try to make sure it's as waterproof of a seal as possible. Since this is pretty low on the transmission, it'd be easy if you're hitting like a small water crossing or even just splashing through puddles hard enough in the Jeep that it could get a little bit of water up in here. So I want to seal it as best as possible. Now we're going to screw it all back together. All right, and then flipping it over here, we're gonna reinstall our gasket. This is the locking portion that holds the nut on so it can't loosen up. This is indexed, so we wanna make sure that we get it in the proper direction. Just like that. And then lastly, we have our nut, which is gonna get reinstalled. And right now, we just wanna do this pretty loose, so we can slide it over the gear selector. And now, we have it all ready to rock and roll, and let's go install it on the vehicle. All right, so now that we've got it reinstalled, we need to check two things. First, that it'll start in park, and then that it'll start in neutral. Normally they'll start in park pretty easily, but if it doesn't start in neutral, that means that on the neutral safety switch, it can actually rotate. That means we need to rotate to adjust it to get that neutral portion to line up properly. The actual bolt that holds it on is oblong, so you can rotate that piece back and forth. But yeah, so let's see if she starts up. Sweet. Park works. And now let's try neutral. And neutral works. So hopefully now we should be able to crank up the car reliably, and that switch isn't going to cause any more issues with a no crank, no start. Hopefully this video helped you out if you have a no start situation and it happens to be your neutral safety switch. It's a pretty easy job to be able to clean up and repair that. It only costs about $3 for some dielectric grease. And a little bit of elbow grease to remove and replace it. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If this video helped you fix your Jeep or you just enjoyed watching, give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. As always, thanks for watching.